Second Chronicles, chapter 12. Second Chronicles, which comes after First Chronicles. Chapter 12, which comes after chapter 11, but comes before chapter 13, right. I'm doing, as I come through my Bible readings this time, I got a couple word studies and phrases I'm doing. One of them is the word woe. 97, 98 times, I think it says that the word woe is in there. So that's my blue highlighter. Next, my phrase that I'm doing is every verse that has that where God says, I hear and I see. But the same action there is found in the same word. Probably under 100 of those that are there. I'm marking those phrases with that. But my big word, that I'm doing this time, which is my purple highlighter, is the word deliver in that. I've circled so many and underlined so many, I had to go to highlighters because I got too many word studies going on. But now as I'm reading through and I'm doing those word studies as I do it, I already got, there's normally God prompts me there for the next one to come. Well, the next word study that's coming next time I read through is the word destroy. So I was thinking about that at the middle of this week, and I thought there's got to be something there, deliverance or destroy. And so I used my Bible gateway to said, okay, where is it at that both destroy and deliver are found in the same verse? And so 2 Chronicles 12, verse 7, we have it. So there's a couple others, like 3 or 4 other verses that have that, but this one was the one that I was drawn to. I wrote the prayer email out of yesterday, Friday night and yesterday, and so I just wanted to stay with this as I bring you this word. And that was long before Hurricane Harvey decided to show up and do what devastation and disaster that we're seeing right now. But I do believe it's the tragedy of most things of knowing. You look at people, our circumstances, where we're at in our world conditions right now, and you look at this and you say, I wonder what's going to come of this. I mean, every drug overdose death, where we're at a rate now of like 1,000 happening within every 2-3 weeks. I mean, those are big numbers when you start looking at it in a 52-week, 12-month period with that. We had Margie and Hannah Rawlings Monday night over there at the house, and they shared about what was going on in India. 1 in 4 of every girl that's born in India, 1 in 4, 25%, will never get past the age of puberty. They die from either suicide, death, just horrible conditions. Numbers are staggering of those that are sold into sex slavery. I never know anything else but that. 1 billion people population in India, and 3% of that population are Christian, which means 97% are following the lie. Hinduism, Muslim, family generational worship that they do, a lot of that in Asia. It's part of that 1040 window that is so dark. I remember Tom Melliff, who used to be the executive director for International Mission Board, and he took a trip in India, and he said, when you come on an entire village, an entire city of thousands of people, and not one Christian in the midst of it. I mean, even Sodom and Gomorrah had who? Lot. There was only one, but at least they had one. But that's staggering numbers where he says you go to an entire village, an entire city, and just feel the evil resonating from it because of the pagan worship, lifestyles, choices that are just devaluing and evil in that. And that's an entire nation, an entire country. Now again, we've got Christian churches, I mean, what did we say, 97 churches in Hampshire County? That's a lot of churches. But again, out of 24,000, there are less than 3,000 people in church on Sunday morning out of 24,000. What's that? 1/8? What's that percentage? 12%? One of eight? Something like that. Come on, mathematician, get with me. Less than 12%. I mean, those are not good numbers in any shape or form. So, with that kind of lifestyle, every week, every month, every year that we've seen, where are we going with this? What's going to happen at the close of 2017 with 4 months left? What's 2018 setting up to look like with all the protest and racial strife and the transgender laws and all transgender? They sent a first grader, 6 years old, in California, who addressed one of the fellow students that was a transgender, 6 years old, transgender, and they addressed him by the wrong pronoun, and sent the child that's 6 years old, slipped up, called him a him when he was a shim or a she or whatever it was, sent him to the principal's office, threatened to expel him, discipline him, correct him for calling the child the wrong gender. California Senate just passed a law this week. If you do not identify what they want to be called as, you face legal action. That passed the California Senate this week. If it goes through and becomes law of the state, it is the course, the wave of the future for all 50 states. Just like they did with homosexuality, just like they did with abortion, it will be the law of the land that you have to, and that says from the pulpits, don't you preach against it. Don't you call us what we don't want to be called, tickling of the ears and all that stuff. That's what's coming. And it's coming so fast, so rapid, that most people aren't even, until it happens. Then, I never even saw that coming. I just got done doing that book of Daniel with you. You better see the handwriting on the wall of what it is. So we're at a choice. We're at a very pivotal point. I'm praying for deliverance. That's my focus right now in my word study. But if we're not delivered, then the opposite of that is going to happen, destruction. So I want to give you, in this account, learn the lessons of time. Rehoboam was the son of Solomon. Solomon was the son of David. You know David, right? Man after God's own heart. You know, one of the greatest kings that ever ruled and reigned. Great man of God in that. Here comes the son of Solomon. Solomon for 20 years does great. Builds the temple. Builds his own house and that. 20 years, he does great. But after that 20 years, his last 20 years of his life, his strange wives, and again, he had a few, just a couple. Right? Some of y'all got that. Thousands concubines and wives and that he had. And he married and he associated with those of the ites that he wasn't supposed to be associated. And God even warned them, if you do this, they will turn your heart away from me. And so you read that the end of Solomon was horrible. And they turned, in his old age, they turned the heart of Solomon to Molech and to Chocon and to Baal and to Ashtaroth. And he did all the false gods and all the false worships. After he built the temple of the Lord, in his first 20 years, he spent the next 20 years destroying his legacy because he worshipped the false gods. And so God said, because you've done this, I'm going to pull the kingdom away from you. And I'm going to give 10 tribes to Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who did worse. And I'm going to give your son 1 tribe, Judah, and Benjamin. Well, actually there was 2 there, Benjamin and that. And I will always have for David, because he was faithful to me, at least one of the tribes of Israel. And so you read throughout the rest of 1 Chronicles, the rest of 2 Chronicles, all the kings of Israel, all from Jeroboam to the time of their departure in 712 BC, they had the same phrase about them. And they did evil in the sight of the Lord, and they followed the gods of Jeroboam, who caused Israel to sin. Judah, David's line, Solomon, Rehoboam, hit and miss. You'd have one good king, then you'd have two bad kings. You'd have one good king, then you'd have three bad kings. I mean, it was not good. Matter of fact, you could sit here and name the good kings: Hezekiah, Josiah, Jehoshaphat, good kings, did right in the sight of the Lord. But the rest of them, they did evil in the sight of the Lord. Now Solomon, as I said, started off well, but he didn't finish well. So I would think you better learn the lesson now. It's best not to start well and finish well than it is to start well and not finish well. Got that? I don't think you did. It's better to not start well and finish well than to start well and not finish well. I'm going to make a bumper sticker of that and see if anybody else gets that, okay? So Rehoboam starts well, doesn't do well, then he comes back. But he's still attributed that he did evil in the sight of the Lord. So in chapter 12, 2 Chronicles, let's start in verse 1. Rehoboam has become king now. Okay? And it came to pass that when Rehoboam had established the kingdom, strengthened himself, he forsook the law of the Lord. Good or bad? Forsook the law of the Lord. Bad. So right off the bat, right out of the chute, he gets the kingdom established and does what? Turns away from the Lord. You know, and all of Israel with him. And it came to pass that in the 5th year of King Rehoboam, Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem because they had transgressed against the Lord. So the enemy, Egyptians, come against Jerusalem to ransack, to defeat them. And again, the cause. It's not just a matter of knowing, well, they're enemies. Naturally, they're going to fight, right? It's like the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're just naturally going to fight, right? Football's coming up, so. You look at those things. Here's the children of God, Israel, Judah, and here comes the enemy. Oh, well, that's no problem. The Egyptians hate the Israelites. The Israelites hate the Egyptians. That's not why. Why did God send the Egyptians against the Israelites, against Judah? At the end of that verse there, 3. They transgressed against the Lord. What's our nation doing? Legalizing homosexuality, legalizing drug usage, legalizing transgenderism. What are they doing? Transgressing against the Lord. When you repeat behaviors, you're going to reap the same thing. If God did this to his own children, what's he going to do to us? Pay attention to the lessons of history. Okay? Verse 3, and with 1,200 chariots, 70,000 horsemen, that's 60,000 horsemen, and the people were without number. They came with him out of Egypt, the Lubims, the Sukkiims, and the Ethiopians. And he took the fenced cities which pertained to Judah, and he came to Jerusalem. Then came Shemaiah the prophet to Rehoboam, and to the princes of Judah that were gathered together to Jerusalem because of Shishak, and said unto them, Thus saith the Lord, You have forsaken me, and therefore have I also left you in the hand of Shishak. What an awful statement, huh? You've forsaken me, so I'm going to let your enemies have their will and their way with you. You and I ought to be at the place of saying, Lord, don't let that happen. Don't forsake us. We need you in this. So, verse 6, Wherefore the princes of Israel and the king. This is leadership, government leadership. This was what would be required of the governor, of the president, Congress, judicial, Supreme Court justices, anybody in authority, leadership for our government. And they humbled themselves and they said, The Lord is righteous. Now, if they said that today, what would be the next news post? If President Trump come out on the steps of the White House and said, We have sinned against the Lord, Hurricane Harvey is decimating our South Gulf Coast states, Lord, please forgive us, we need you. What would CNN report on him in the next 5 minutes?
Blaspheming.
Separation church and state. Don't you tell us what we did was wrong. You just get back in the White House and keep your mouth shut. Right? They don't want to hear nothing of that. From the pulpits, from the president or leadership. But that's what's required. Pulpits have to do this too. Humble yourselves. They humbled themselves and cried out to the Lord. The Lord is righteous. Verse 7, when the Lord saw that they humbled themselves, the word of the Lord came to Shemaiah, saying, they have humbled themselves. Therefore I will not destroy them, but I will grant them some deliverance. In my wrath it shall not be poured out upon Jerusalem by the hand of Shishak. Nevertheless they shall be his servants, that they may know my service and the service of the kingdoms of the countries. So Shishak, king of Egypt, came up against Jerusalem, took away the treasures of the house of the Lord, the treasures of the king's house. He took all. He carried away also the shields of gold, which Solomon had made, and instead of which King Rehoboam made shields of brass, committed them to the hands of the chief of the guard that kept the entrance of the king's house. When the king entered into the house of the Lord, the guard came and fetched them and brought them again into the guard chamber. And when he humbled himself, the wrath of the Lord turned from him, that he would not destroy him altogether. And also in Judah things went well. So King Rehoboam strengthened himself in Jerusalem, reigned and reigned. For Rehoboam was 41 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 17 years in Jerusalem, the city which the Lord had chosen out of all the tribes of Israel to put his name there. And his mother's name was Naamah, an Ammonitess. What's wrong with that? His mother's name? One of those Ammonites. I just got done telling you in Sunday school, who did Joab go out and fight and destroy when David was sitting in Jerusalem?
One of those types.
Joab went and fought the Ammonites and was destroying them. And he did evil because he prepared not his heart to seek the Lord. Let's pray. Blessed Father, I ask of you this day, teach us. Learn the lessons of time. Repeat behaviors of a nation, of a people, of an individual will reap the same results. May we not be like Rehoboam. May we not be like Judah. May we not be like Solomon in the latter half of his years. Father, again, that you would keep us every day of our life in service to you, in love with you, in fervency to you, because, Lord, everything of our future hangs on it. Lord, we're responsible for this day and this time. And so much has happened in our lifetime, from 9/11 to Hurricane Katrina to the economic collapse of 2007 and 2008, and now, Father, Hurricane Harvey. Lord, these things are on our watch, on our lifetime. We're responsible. Lord, what are we leaving to the next generation? What will they reap? What will they become if they don't see the goodness in us? May we not have the testimony of Rehoboam who did evil in the sight of the Lord. But Lord, may our hearts be fully yielded to you. Make us to be a right people, a holy people, a good people that you can use and bless. And help us, O Lord, that we remain humble before you, because, Lord, we can't do this without you. We need you in this hour. And the future of our nation hangs in the balances to either be destroyed or be to deliver. And we seek you today to ask of you, deliver us, even if it's from our own selves. Deliver us from evil. I pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. I read these stories over and over and over, and so again, every time I come through there, it's like a ball-peen hammer hitting me. Oh, what's wrong with you? Rehoboam, didn't you learn from your dad what causes when you turn away from God? You would think that's just a simple lesson, right? Hey, I'm not going to become like that. You know, my older kids, the older ones in their 20s, and they've made bad choices, sinful choices, wrong choices. And so I get the next 4 coming up, and they'll say, Dad, I promise you, I am not going to be like them. You know what I say? I want that in writing. I've called the notary. I've got the legal documents. I've got a letter from Jacob when he was just a kid. I mean, under 10, and he wrote me. And he, again, a child from the mouth of babes. I promise you, Dad, I will always honor what you said, do what you said. And I kept that because, again, I'm ready to pull the Trump card. And I don't mean that in the lessons of President Trump, the You said, I got it in writing, man. You said you never break my heart. You said you never disobey me. You said you keep the ways of the Lord. I mean, I've got it. Now, again, didn't you say the same thing when you came to Christ? Lord, I'm all yours from this day forward. You know, the marriage vow, for better, for worse, richer, for poor, Lord. I don't care what life throws at me. I am yours, and you are mine. Lord, I'm going to serve you. You can use me, take me, fill me, whatever you want to do, Lord. I'm yours. Didn't you make a vow? You're supposed to. My life is no longer mine. You forfeited your life that day. Death to self, take up your cross, come follow me. We made those vows. And then when we get stopped in life and we'll think, well, you know, I'm not keeping my part of the agreement. You know, I'm over here watching this show, movie. I'm participating in this. Lord, I don't think this is pleasing to you. I think I broke my vow, Lord. Lord, I'm sorry. And quick to get back to where you need to be. These guys never learned the lesson. You know, you think about Wile E. Coyote. He kept telling, I'm super genius. I think he was dumb as a rock. He never learned, did he? You know, you just got to be stupid to keep doing the same stupid thing, the same stupid way all the time. And that's what people do, isn't it? And then when it's got them, and they can't get away from it, then they'll come to themselves, I wish I could. I wish I could get back. But I can't. You know why? Because they've gone too far. God says that there in that one verse there. He says, you have forsaken me. And therefore, because you forsook me, now this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to let your enemies have their way with you. That's an awful thing for a nation to say, but it's also individually. That when we forsake God, how have we forsaken God? Well, how many people fill a football stadium on Sundays? 100,000? You can't even get that in church. 100,000 people to sit around. And I've seen them up there at Green Bay in sub-zero weather, no shirt. See? Stupid. Rooting their team on. But boy, they're faithful. But not in the church. God's people have forsaken God. They'd rather have entertainment. Jeremy the Juggler. Sorry, Jeremy the Juggler ain't showing up. Just Dan the Preacher. But the idea of this is that learn this lesson, what happened here. Rehoboam knew better. He's 41 years old when he begins to reign. Don't you think he was a grown man? He should have known, right? Hey, you know, Dad didn't do so well. The wisest, most understanding man that was ever on the face of the planet. God, remember that? God came to him and said, ask anything you want. What would you do if God came to you tonight and said that? Ask me anything that you want. Solomon says, I got to lead these people. I don't know how to do that. Give me wisdom and understanding. I got it marked in my Bible. Wisdom and understanding 3 times in a row. Solomon asked for that, and God says, because you've asked for this, I'm going to give you wisdom and understanding. Because you didn't ask for riches, you didn't ask for long life, you didn't ask the heads of your enemy, I'm also going to give you that. So he asked for one thing, and he ended up getting 5 or 6 things. Now that sounds like a Walmart deal, doesn't it? That sounds pretty good. But he asked for the right thing. But here's the wisest man on all the planet. And he becomes the utter fool because he goes against God. Now here comes his son, Rehoboam, who's seen all this. He knows about David. Everybody knows about David. He did that which was right in the sight of the Lord. David was a man after God's own heart. David was the one that penned the words, as the hart pants after the water brook, so pants my soul after you, O God. David thirsted after God, didn't he? David loved the Lord. As a matter of fact, he even says that in that one song, I love you, O Lord. I ask you that quite often. When was the last time that you honestly said to the Lord, I just love you, Lord? I mean, it ought to be a daily thing, but I don't want you just to say it. I mean, say it to mean it. You know, I play that game with Georgie. She'll look at me and she'll say, I love you. And I was like, I know you do. I know what she wants me to say. Okay, I play the game. She goes, oh, I love you. And I was like, that's nice. I know she wants me to say it back. But I just don't want to say the words. I want every word to mean it when I say it. And this is the relationship of God to His church, God to His children. Do you love the Lord? Oh, yes, of course I do, Dan. Don't ask me such a silly question. But your actions aren't saying it. Your deeds aren't saying it. The church is not in a healthy state right now. Judah was not in a healthy state. As soon as Rehoboam became king, he did what? He forsook the law of the Lord. What's our nation doing? Everything else goes except for God's way, right? Don't want the Bible. Don't want prayer. Don't want to be told what's right and what's wrong. You know, selfishness rules and reigns in this day and time. I don't care what that book says. You can preach to me all you want. I'm not changing. I don't know how many times I've heard that in the last 5 years. And don't change it. I don't tell people just to make them mad. I tell them because that's what the book says. That's the truth. The hope. If we don't get turned around, we're going to reap the same thing that Rehoboam did. So God says, okay, you want to live like this. You want to make these choices that offend me, anger me, provoke me. Well, this is what I'm going to do. There's a king down there in Egypt, and I'm going to let him bring all his army up with the Lubans and the Ethiopians that you can't even count them, 60,000 horses alone, not counting foot soldiers. And they're going to come up, and they ransacked all the cities of Judah. Jerusalem had double walls, and nobody could get in and nobody could get out. It was a fortified city. They surrounded that. Now, when Rehoboam and all the leaders saw the army of Egypt coming, their senses kicked in. Hey, let's call upon the Lord. 9/11. What did the nation do? Called upon the Lord. Hurricane Katrina. What did you hear about on the media? Pray for Louisiana. Pray for New Orleans, right? What are you hearing about Hurricane Harvey right now? Pray for Texas, right? And it lasts for a short season, and as soon as it comes, it goes. And no lasting endurance with that. These people humbled themselves. You know what it means to humble themselves? You get down. You get down on your knees. You get down on your face, and you say, God, we have sinned against you. The prodigal son humbled himself. He was out there feeding the hogs. You know, I fed hogs most of my life. I fed them the mesh, and I fed them the slop. They didn't have mesh back then, so he just fed them the slop. And the prodigal son was so hungry that feeding him the slop, he said, that sure does look good. I'm sorry. I ain't never been that hungry. Now, I've been hungry, but never that hungry to look at that slop and say, boy, I think I'll get in there and get over there, piggy. I want to jump in here and share this. Never. Never did it appeal to me. But the prodigal son was so hungry, so much in despair. He said, even the husk of that pig looks good to me. And it says that little phrase there, and he came to himself. I keep praying for individuals that are back there on that board, your loved ones. I keep praying for our nation. I keep praying for the church. Oh, God, let us come to ourselves. We're running out of time. I don't know why people can't see this. I don't understand why people can't understand where we're at, what's going on. We're in a bad way with so much evil being legalized, permitted, practiced. Guys that I'm working with on that roof and that kind of stuff, the guy said to me, he said, well, this is what I've worked with. You see these felons and drug addicts and those kind of things. And I said, you're going to find it hard not find someone that isn't like that. in this day and time. We're the minority. We're not the majority of people that used to be moral and decent and good Christian people. That's a small bucket of people. The majority of people today are drug addicts and alcoholics and gamblers and lottery people and profanity speakers and selfish. That's the majority of people out there today. It's only a small group that humble themselves and seek the Lord and love the Lord. Small portion of people that are in the Word of God. Small portion of people that are in the house of God. Small portion of people that know anything about eternity or even think about eternity. That's the reason I could have someone sitting in church for 60 years. Turn to them and say, don't you know? Don't you know how to get to heaven? Well, no, I don't. I don't know how. The Lord. There is no other way to enter into the kingdom of heaven. You must be born again. The kingdom of heaven comes through Jesus Christ alone. But they've sat in church for 60 years and they don't know the first thing about getting into heaven. How is that possible? Absence of the Word of God. Void of the Spirit of God. That's how that's possible. It's not bouncing around up here, and it definitely ain't here. But when they humbled themselves and they cried out to God, look at God's mercy. He sends the prophet back. Shimei. Nobody ever talks about Shimei. Everybody talks about the prophet Elijah or Elisha, which I preached on last week. Everybody talks about John the Baptist, the greatest prophet that ever was. They talk about Isaiah and Jeremiah, the big names of the Bible, the books of the Bible. But I don't ever hear anybody talk about Shimei. It doesn't even roll off my tongue that well either. Can I call him Shim for short? Larry, Mo, and Shim? But Shimei, the Lord sent him back to Rehoboam and to the leaders and said, because you've humbled yourself, because you've called upon me, I've heard you, I've seen you, and I'm going to answer you. And I'm going to pull back the Egyptians. Not all the way, but I'm not going to let them annihilate you. Don't you think God has the ability and the power to pull that Hurricane Harvey right off out of Texas and throw it down there in the Gulf of Mexico? He could do it. But he's going to let this thing happen until God's people, the church, and the nation humbles themselves and gets back and says, Lord, we have forsaken your ways. We have forgotten your name. And Lord, we're going to humble ourselves and we're going to get back and start doing right. Lord, we made vows to you and we broke those vows. I'm going to get back and I'm going to start doing right. Now this is national. And again, I'm fearful that if we don't get this lesson, guess what comes next week? Guess what comes next month? Now Wall Street collapses. Now we got war with North Korea. Next disaster comes along. I said, it's been 2 years since an 8.0 earthquake, and the earthquakes are running 52 right now. The lowest point since July, there was at 40s in that. And I know that don't mean nothing to you, but I've kept track of earthquakes for a decade now. So I know when, hey, we're due. Not because I'm prophetic, it's just I see the pattern that goes on. We have a 7.0 earthquake every month. So if you don't have one in a month, guess what's going to come next month? It's almost a sure thing. Well, we went 5 months without one this year. So I knew we was due. And then first part of August, guess what came? 7.5 earthquake. Now again, nobody cares if an earthquake hits down to Antarctica. The penguins are not going to form a protest. Okay? Nobody cares if it happens over in New Zealand, someplace like that where the pygmies are at, and there's only a couple hundred people. But you let an 8.5 earthquake hit San Francisco, and all of America will sit up and say, why does this happen? Because we didn't learn the lesson of time. This is the course of people's choices and agendas. Every one of my children, I've warned the path that they're walking. This is what you're going to read. I've sat down with people left and right all the time, begging with them, pleading with them. Look, I know what's coming. I know what's going to happen. It's not because I'm some mystic or something like that, but I just know that God is consistent. He's the same yesterday, today, and forever. And if He did this 3,000 years ago, what's He going to do to us? Same thing. So you warn people. But they look at you and they say, what? Mind your own business. I'm not listening to you. I'm going to continue on. And they become just like Rehoboam. They become just like Solomon in the last half of his life. They become just like Jeroboam and all the other kings of Israel. And they did evil in the sight of the Lord, and they lose that which God gave to them as an opportunity to grow in the fear of the Lord. So again, you give the warning. Humble yourself. Come to the Lord. Renew your vows. Time's running out. And here in the midst of this, Rehoboam listened. He did exactly what he was supposed to do. And God honored him for that. Get down. Find some place in your bedroom, living room. I remember one old boy, he was in his 70s, just an old rough guy. Never knew much about God, never knew much about church. Living down there along Route 220. Kicked the coffee table over, fell down on his knees and his face with tears, never cried, never, he was a man's man. He didn't cry. And man, he bawled like a baby that day right down there on the carpet. He humbled himself. He called upon God. And then he died. I believe with all my heart by what that man said and what that man did, I'll see him in heaven. He turns to his wife. Don't you want this? Come get some of this great joy and forgiveness and love of God. I will not. And she died. I'll never see her again. One chooses, one humbles, and the other one is proud and haughty and arrogant and says, leave me alone. And I heard Ravenhill tell a story about a woman. She was a missionary. She worked for the Salvation Army. Now again, the Salvation Army is not, if I say Salvation Army today, the first thing you think about is the guys that stand over there with the red buckets ringing the bell at Christmas time, okay? I tried to get him to do that in July so that they'd just throw money in and ring the bell, and but it didn't have Salvation Army, it just had Pfizer's Army, Police said, please pick up your stuff and go home, so it didn't work too well. But Salvation Army is not just about the Christmas ringing the bells and that. It used to be a huge, William Booth founded it to minister to the alcoholics, to the orphans, to the widows on the streets of London. And it grew because they preached the gospel of Christ. He was kicked out of the Methodist church. And when he was standing on the curb, his wife looks at him and says, what are we going to do now? He says, we'll go to those that are most in need. And it went into 90 churches, or 90 nations in 70 years. Worldwide. God honored him. He used to send missionaries out 2 by 2. Like the scripture says. 2 men go out together, 2 women go out together. Well, these 2 women were out there. I don't even remember which country they were in. But they had a fight. Got a disagreement. And the one that got so mad at the other one over this nonsense. They used to have to wear hats, long things of modesty and that kind of stuff. She tore her hat up. She tore her dress up. She pitched a fit. She took her Bible, tore her Bible up, threw it in the fire. She said, I'm done. I don't believe this stuff anymore. I will never serve God. Leave me alone. Man, that's bad. Serious, serious evil right there. Ravenhill's preaching a sermon, and she comes to the altar, and she cries for 45 minutes straight. He can't get her to talk. He can't get her to move, and she just sits there and cries and cries. He says, woman, I cannot help you unless you talk to me. She said, Mr. Ravenhill, you will never know what this service meant to me. And she told the story. I was the Salvation Army. I sat under William Booth. I heard him preach the gospel. The Holy Spirit convicted me. I knew his spirit. And I got mad. Tore the Bible up. Cursed. Blasphemed. And I said, don't bother me again. And for 40 years, he hasn't bothered me. I haven't heard from him. Do you know what it is like to live a life without God? Joy, peace. Sinners do it all the time because they don't know anything. But Christians that have experienced it and then get away from it know that they're missing something, don't they? 40 years, she said, and tonight he came back. And I cannot tell you the joy of him coming back to me. I never met this woman. I don't know anything else of her condition. But to hear that account and to know that all of us are in a place that we can get mad, upset. 40 years. Deliver me or destroy me. That close. And God says, I will not destroy you because you've humbled yourself. You've returned to me. And I'm going to take care of you. And things went well in Judah after that. There would be decency again. There would be morality again. There would be goodness again if we would learn this lesson. But the way that we're going, the way I've seen in my lifetime, the last 30 years that I've seen, we're not heading for deliverance. We're heading for destruction. And I feel like the guy at the railroad tracks where the tracks are broke down and the people are just flying left and right. And here comes the train and I'm standing out there flying. Don't go, there's danger. They blow the horn. Get out of the way. Shut up. Idiot, get off the road. Get out of my way. And they're heading and steamrolling right to it. You can't continue this way of life that our nation is in right now, that our families are in, that our loved ones are in, and not expect to reap the same thing. And our response has to be somewhere in your house every day, you humble yourself. Lord, our nation is so arrogant, so proud, but I bow myself before you and cry out on their behalf. I used it as an illustration this morning, and I give it to you. On the top, we got a white cabinet there in our mud room, and there's about 6, 7 umbrellas. Some of them work, some of them don't. Don't have time to go into that one. But when it rains, I get the biggest umbrella, and I put me and my wife under it. Now, when Rebecca's with us, I'll say, see if you can't squeeze in here, and I hold the umbrella so that we are all safely underneath that umbrella, protected from the weather. I don't want them to get wet. I don't want to get wet. They're my responsibility. I have to protect them. That's my umbrella. They're under. My children are under my umbrella. You're under my umbrella. I'm responsible for you. And I carry that umbrella because of God's mercy to cover us, to protect us. But if there is no umbrella to protect us, then guess what? You're going to be out in the weather, in the elements. Who's protecting them? Who's under your umbrella? Who are you responsible for? Humble yourself before the Lord and give them unto Him and protect them. The reality is that they're senseless. They don't know that they need protection. They don't know that they need deliverance. They think, hey, this is the way everything is. You know better. Protect them. Pray for them. Cry out to God for mercy for them. And the Lord will come and speak and say, I've heard you. I've seen your tears. I know your heart. I'm going to deliver them. You've heard me say it in my prayer. You know, we need deliverance from more than anybody is ourselves. That's our greatest enemy. That's our nation. North Korea is not a threat to us. Russia's not a threat to us. China's not a threat to us. We are our worst enemy right now. We are self-destructive. So my prayer, deliver us from ourselves, Lord. Because if God does not deliver us, then he is going to destroy us. That's just the reality of it. That's our nation. That's our future. That's family. And that's individuals. And I come before the Lord with this so often. I don't want to see him destroyed. Like Rehoboam, there's always God's opportunity of mercy. Come back to me. Come back. The old invitational hymn, just as I am, Jesus, I come. Come unto me, all you that are laboring, heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Come unto me, all you that are thirsty, and I'll give you drink, and you'll never thirst again. Come unto me. And you just beg and plead with, come to Jesus. The world will never get this. Government will never get this. But the church has to get this. It has to start with you and I. Humble yourself. Seek his face. Call upon his name. Get up every day with one priority. Lord, I'm going out here into this world. Go before me. And that umbrella that you carry of your loved ones, take with you. Lord, they won't pray for themselves today. They got up and flew out the door, went to school, went to work. No regards, no thoughts about who they are, what they are, responsibility to God. They won't pray for themselves. How many people got up today, having sat up till 1, 2 o'clock in the morning watching some stupid fight where they made $100 million to fight, billions of dollars to gamble. And they got up this morning and they're still talking about it. But they wouldn't even bow their head to say, Lord, thank you for getting me up today. I'm telling you, the people in Houston would do anything to gather in the church today, but they can't. Now their homes are gone, and their possessions are gone, and their lives are in jeopardy. They know what they're losing, don't they? Our opportunity, cry out to God. Help us. In this most desperate hour, help us, God, before it's too late. Destruction or deliverance? We're headed for destruction. We're in the midst of it right now. See the handwriting on the wall. I sit with you today. Shared you my heart as best I can. There is still time for God to deliver us. May not deliver us completely, like he did for Rehoboam, but he will make things to go well if we humble ourselves and get back to him. But if the church wants to continue to play games, entertainment, food, all the other things, and forget the most important things, we will be destroyed. In our lifetime, we'll see it. Not the next 5 years, it's pretty close. I'm not talking about decades. You cannot see what we've seen and not expect something on the horizon with the way that we've continued to legalize abominations in this day and time. And the church is running out of time to respond rightly. And it may only start with a little group like us, but that's fine. That's where it's got to start. My heart, your heart, my umbrella, your umbrella, to get before the Lord and to say, Lord, please don't destroy us. Abraham pleaded with God before he destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Did he stop it? Jeremiah pleaded with Zedekiah before Babylon came in and destroyed it. Did he stop it? But they tried. I would rather try and fail than never try at all. Because there's still hope. There's still opportunity for God to come and work in August of 2017. Before we get to September. Today. Now. Cry out to the Lord. Help us. Lord, my loved ones don't even have any thoughts of you. Help me. Deliver them. Deliver us. Let that be our prayer. Let's pray. Holy Father, blessed Lord, come before you today to learn the lesson of time, 2 Chron.